Andrea Flores, who was down there while all this happened, and Adam Schiff started to give his speech, and then that's when things took a turn, Andrea.
They certainly did, Golston. I mean, from one moment to the next, it went from a very happy crowd to, as Edie described, very explosive. And it was in a blink of an eye, really, here. You saw it live on air. We saw it here in person, where people just started chanting for a ceasefire in Gaza and just essentially taking over Adam Schiff's remarks here as he was thanking his supporters and his peers here in Hollywood at the Avalon in this event here. Of course, this event, many people were invited to this event, and it was something that I don't believe anyone saw coming. I certainly did not see it coming. And all of a sudden, just like that, we saw that change in the atmosphere, a change in the mood, and it really did get scary for some folks. You started to see a lot of people try to get out of the way as folks started getting in other people's faces. I mean, it became really contentious here, as you saw live here on KCRA 3. And of course, we've seen these protests at the state level, we've seen these protests at the national level, and of course, we've seen them here at Congressman Schiff's headquarters celebration, what was supposed to be a celebration, but those chants from those protesters really drowning out what he was saying to his supporters here. And I do want to mention, earlier today, we were at the polls, we were talking with voters, and one of the things that came up in those conversations was candidates' stances on the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas and where candidates stood on that. And so you come to an event like this, and maybe you might not expect it, but that very much is part of the discussion amongst the voters here in Los Angeles, also other parts of the state and around the country. So it is not surprising to see it in this atmosphere because we have seen it, but it was certainly shocking to see it happen in real time. And we want to show you this from that moment. Take a listen.
So you had a chance to meet my wonderful wife, Eve.
We saw that contentious moment here, supporters and protesters going head-to-head here, yelling in each other's faces, reporting, security guards trying to get people out. We heard those protesters, even as they were leaving out the front door, continuing to protest and calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. So again, from supporters to protesters, and even during his speech, Schiff said he thanked the protesters because they have that right to protest here. But again, certainly an unexpected moment here at the celebration in Hollywood. We want to show you some sound from earlier.
We are so lucky to live in that kind of democracy, and we want to make sure that we keep this kind of democracy.
And you just heard from some supporters who were here tonight. Many of the supporters were here to congratulate Congressman Schiff. But again, certainly an uneasy feeling here as we wrap up the night, because I think a lot of people were really stunned. People didn't know what to do and didn't know how to react.
You know, Andrea, one of the reasons I think it really took me by surprise is because these are generally, on election night, very controlled events and different from campaign events or other kinds of things where candidates are speaking. On this kind of night, election night, I'm wondering how these folks got in. I know when you RSVP'd, you weren't even guaranteed as a member of the media that you could get in. So how did this happen?
Absolutely, Edie, and that's a great point. Even when we RSVP'd, it wasn't a guarantee that you would be allowed in. And I do want to mention, there was no metal detector that we saw here, that we went through. We were just allowed in. We showed our credentials and we were allowed in here. Of course, we know that people had tickets and were invited. People also brought guests, so it's unclear if there were people who perhaps brought guests and those people were protesting, or if there was some sort of organized effort to disrupt tonight's remarks from the congressman. But I do have to say, it seemed as though with the amount of people protesting here, I would say at least half a dozen to a dozen people, it didn't seem like there was enough security or enough manpower here to try and control the situation. And I think you could really see that. You could see on the stage there was not a whole lot that they could do. Even on the ground level where there were supporters here, there really wasn't a whole lot that they were able to do, and they were able to escort some of those protesters off. There were still other protesters, and there were people who were fighting the security, trying to stay, trying to make sure that their voices were heard. So again, even coming in through the front door, it wasn't too clear that there were any sort of extra safety precautions, metal detectors, or any big efforts in terms of security that we saw here. It didn't seem lax, but it wasn't as ramped up as you would expect, especially for such a high-profile election, especially for such a high-profile seat that we have seen. Of course, we know that this has gotten not only local attention here in Los Angeles, also in Northern California, across the state, and across the country. So again, just a really shocking, surprising turn of events here in Hollywood. We'll send it back to you.
All right, Andrea, thank you.
Yeah.
And as we break away from that coverage, one thing that I would point out is that in addition to this very explosive issue of the war in Gaza, he has taken on Donald Trump repeatedly, and he's talked on the campaign trail about he's been threatened, his family's been threatened, his wife was sent 2 bullets with their children's names on them. So this is somebody who I would have expected to have a little tighter security, to be honest.
Right, and even have the expectation that this kind of protest would
Yes.
break out, because, I mean, we've seen them across the country, across the state, at the state capitol numerous times, here in Sacramento numerous times, but potentially just from potentially the Schiff's point of view, these are also Democratic voters. I think there's a delicate balance that I think some politicians on that side of the aisle have to play, because, again, I think they want to be receptive to these calls. But yeah, security-wise, what Andrea described is shocking.
Yeah, and look, I'm not saying what happened tonight was anti-Semitic, because it wasn't. It was, just these chants of ceasefire now, free Palestine, protest. Obviously it's a private event. You can argue whether or not that should be allowed there, if they broke any rules or laws. But it has been a year where we've seen a lot of anti-Semitic violence, and that's got to be in the back of, lawmakers' mind, anybody who's out
As
campaigning.
a prominent Jewish politician.
Absolutely,
Right.
from a Jewish family. So it just, adds another layer of, what somebody has to go through.
Sure, I'm sure in November, though, I imagine this event will have ample security. At least that would be the expectation.
Well, we were talking a little bit during the last commercial break about maybe what Democrats can expect at the convention. I mean, that's not going to be an Adam Schiff issue. That would be a President Biden issue, but this is a very divisive issue for Democrats.
Absolutely. It's one that I think some thought might have more of an impact on the primaries. I don't think we've really seen that, at least here locally and even at the state level with the way that the Senate race shook out. But it could still continue to be an issue as we move toward the general.
All right. Thanks, Ashley. Let's go